The semester had progressed, and Professor Mustafa's students, Tarek, Layla, and Sarah, were eager for today's class. Professor Mustafa had designed a lesson that would tie together language, culture, and communication skills in real-world scenarios. As they gathered in the classroom, Professor Mustafa stood in front with a smile. Today, he began, we will focus on how nonverbal communication varies across cultures, how history, religion, and politics influence cultural development, and how language reflects these cultural aspects. Professor Mustafa started by discussing the importance of nonverbal communication. When we think of communication, we often focus on words. However, gestures, body language, and eye contact play a crucial role in how we understand each other. Nonverbal cues can have different meanings in different cultures. Tarek raised his hand. Are there any gestures that mean completely different things in other countries? Great question, said Professor Mustafa. Yes, there are many. For instance, in many Western cultures, eye contact is a sign of confidence and respect. However, in some Asian cultures, prolonged eye contact can be seen as rude or confrontational. Layla, always curious about the world, added, so, in some cultures, looking away might be a sign of respect? Exactly, said Professor Mustafa. Now, let's look at gestures. In the US, a thumbs up is generally a sign of approval, but in Australia and the UK, it can be considered offensive. Sarah was intrigued. That's so interesting. It means we need to be careful when communicating non-verbally in different cultures. Professor Mustafa nodded. Yes, understanding these differences is essential to effective communication and avoiding misunderstandings. Tarek then asked, how do things like history, religion, and politics influence a culture's values and behaviors? Professor Mustafa smiled, appreciating the depth of Tarek's question. History, religion, and politics are deeply intertwined with cultural development. Layla chimed in, so, that's why people in the US often focus on personal rights and freedoms? Exactly, said Professor Mustafa. In some cultures, particularly those influenced by Eastern religions such as Buddhism or Confucianism, there is more emphasis on community and collectivism. Sarah, always thoughtful, reflected, so, our cultural behaviors are deeply tied to where we come from, both historically and religiously. Precisely, Professor Mustafa affirmed. History, religion, and politics shape the cultural lens through which people view the world. As the class continued, Professor Mustafa shifted the topic to empathy. One of the most important qualities we can develop when learning about different cultures is empathy. It's not just about understanding differences, it's about caring for those differences and being open to others' experiences and feelings. Tarek asked, how can we show empathy towards people from different backgrounds? Professor Mustafa smiled. Empathy means putting yourself in someone else's shoes. It's about being respectful and considerate of others' perspectives, especially when their experiences differ from yours. Layla nodded. So, empathy involves understanding the values and feelings behind people's actions? Exactly, said Professor Mustafa. Empathy allows us to connect with others on a human level, even if their customs and traditions are unfamiliar to us. Professor Mustafa moved on to the next point, observing cultural behaviors without making assumptions. To engage in respectful cross-cultural interactions, we must avoid making assumptions based on limited knowledge. This means we should observe first and ask questions when necessary.